Homeless man gives his only blanket to freezing Hell's Angel. What happens next will shock you. In a world where many of us rush through life focusing on our own problems, it's often easy to forget that small acts of kindness can create monumental change. Sometimes these acts come from the most unexpected places. This is the story of a homeless man who gave his only blanket to a freezing Hell's Angel biker, not knowing the incredible chain of events he had just set in motion. It all started on a bitterly cold night, when the wind howled through the streets, carrying with it the frost of a long, harsh winter. For most, it was just another night, but for one homeless man it became a turning point, a moment when compassion and selflessness would lead to an unimaginable reward. But before we dive into this heartwarming story, take a moment to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with your friends. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories like this one to life. Now let's begin the story. The wind was relentless that night, biting at the skin of anyone foolish enough to brave the cold. In a small corner of the city, beneath the flickering street lamp, sat a homeless man named John. His face was weathered by years of hardship, and his clothes, threadbare and ragged, did little to protect him from the freezing temperatures. John had been homeless for more years than he cared to count. The streets had become his home and the cold nights his constant companion. He had learned to survive on scraps, finding shelter wherever he could and learning to trust only himself. Despite his circumstances, John had never lost his ability to smile. His heart was warm even when his body was cold. But that night his heart would be tested in ways he never imagined. As the night grew darker, the sound of roaring motorcycles broke the silence. A group of Hell's Angels, an infamous biker gang, was cruising through the streets, their engines roaring like thunder. John watched them from the corner, his tired eyes following their every move. He had seen them before, but tonight something felt different. The bikers pulled up to a nearby diner, their leather jackets gleaming in the streetlight. As they dismounted, John noticed one of them, a young man with a large beard and tattoos that covered his arms. He looked as tough as they come, a true Hell's Angel in every sense of the word. But tonight he looked different. The cold had gotten to him and his teeth were chattering as he stood near his motorcycle trying to warm himself. John knew what it felt like to be cold. He had no shelter, no place to go, and no one to rely on. As the biker shivered, John felt a wave of compassion rush over him. He had something that could help, his only possession of value in this world, a blanket he had found earlier that day. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. Without a second thought, John stood up, his old knees cracking as he shuffled towards the biker. The Hell's Angel turned to look at him, his eyes wide in confusion. John reached out, holding the blanket in his hands, and with a simple gesture he offered it to the biker. "Here," John said, his voice soft. "Take it. You look like you need it more than I do." The biker stared at him for a moment, stunned by the kindness of a man who had nothing. His tough exterior cracked, and for a moment, the coldness of the world seemed to melt away. The biker nodded, taking the blanket from John's hands. "Thanks, man," he said, his voice hoarse from the cold. "I appreciate it." John didn't expect any thanks. He didn't need them. He just wanted to help. As the biker wrapped the blanket around himself, he smiled. The warmth from the blanket spread through him, but more importantly, it was the warmth of kindness, a rare commodity in the world they lived in. Little did John know, this simple act of generosity would ignite a chain of events that would change his life forever. The biker wasn't just any member of the Hell's Angels. He was a respected figure within the gang, someone whose actions held weight. And when word of John's selflessness spread, it would set off a sequence of events that would leave the streets of the city buzzing with stories of what happened next. If you believe in the power of kindness and the idea that small gestures can lead to life-changing moments, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories like this. Don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends. It helps us bring more incredible stories to you. Stay tuned to find out what happens next in this unbelievable story. The next morning, as the sun began to rise, John awoke on the cold concrete ground of his usual spot. The blanket was gone, but for some reason he didn't feel the usual chill that came with waking up on the streets. The memory of the night before lingered in his mind. He had given his only blanket to that biker, and in doing so felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The harsh winds of the early morning cut through the alley, but John didn't mind. He knew it was part of his life now. As he sat up and began to fold his tattered jacket, preparing to find his daily meal, a familiar sound interrupted his thoughts. The rumble of motorcycles, loud, powerful, and unmistakable. John squinted into the distance, and to his surprise, a group of Hell's Angels appeared, riding their bikes down the street, heading straight towards him. The biker from last night was leading the pack. He was no longer shivering, no longer cold. Instead, he looked strong, confident, and strangely grateful. The group pulled up in front of John and they stopped, dismounting with a purpose. "Hey, old man," the biker called out as he approached John, a grin spreading across his face. "You remember me?" John's heart skipped a beat. He recognized the biker instantly, the same man he had helped the night before. The memory of the kindness John had shown him was still fresh in his mind. "Yeah, I remember you," John said, standing up slowly. "How you holding up?" "I'm good, thanks to you," the biker replied, his voice warm now. "You saved my ass last night. You know, we don't forget people like you." John could hardly believe what he was hearing. "What do you mean?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. The biker smiled, looking back at the rest of the group who were now standing around him. One of them, a tall, muscular man with a thick beard, stepped forward, holding something in his hand. "We don't forget acts of kindness like that, man," the tall biker said. "Last night you gave up your only blanket. That's not something a lot of people would do, especially not someone living on the streets." John felt a lump rise in his throat. He had done what felt right, what he would have done for anyone. But now, in the presence of these imposing bikers, it seemed like he had done something extraordinary. The biker handed John a large leather wallet. It was worn but clearly of high quality, with intricate designs etched into the surface. "This is for you," the biker said. "You've earned it." A little something to help out. John was taken aback. He had never been given anything of value like this before. His hands shook slightly as he accepted the wallet, not sure what to say. "No, I can't take this," John muttered, feeling uncomfortable. "I didn't do it for a reward. I was just doing what anyone should do." "We know," the biker replied, "but this is just a token of appreciation. There's more where that came from." As John stared at the wallet in his hands, the biker continued, "You helped one of us, and that means a lot in this world. We look out for our own, but we also look out for people who look out for us." Another biker, a woman with short, spiky hair and tattoos covering both arms, stepped forward. "We've got a little something else for you too," she said, holding out a bag. Inside there were several cans of food, some warm clothing, and a few $100s in cash. "You're one of us now," she said. "You'll never be alone again." John's heart swelled with emotion. In all his years on the streets, he had never been treated with such kindness. To him, the food and money didn't matter as much as the gesture, the acceptance, the recognition of his humanity. For the first time in years, he felt seen. Over the next few weeks, John's life began to change in ways he never imagined. Every few days, he would see the Hell's Angels riding through the streets, and each time, they would stop and offer him something: more food, clothes, or just a moment of conversation. The gang, known for their tough image and rebellious ways, had formed an unlikely bond with the homeless man. And John, in turn, found himself a part of something he had never expected. Word of John's selflessness spread quickly. His story became a symbol of how even the most unexpected acts of kindness could change lives. But the impact didn't stop there. One of the bikers, who went by the name Shadow, was a successful businessman in his own right. After learning more about John's situation, Shadow took it upon himself to help John turn his life around. He arranged for John to get an apartment, provided him with a steady job, and even helped him get connected with local shelters and social services to get back on his feet. "I'm not going to let you live like this anymore," Shadow told John one afternoon, sitting with him at a cafe. "You've got potential. You just need a little help to get back on track." The next few months were a blur for John. With the support of the Hell's Angels and Shadow, he began to rebuild his life. He moved into a small apartment, cleaned himself up, and even began to reconnect with his family, whom he hadn't spoken to in years. Slowly, the pieces of his broken life began to fit together again. But the most significant change came in the form of a deep friendship. John had found family in the Hell's Angels, a group of people who saw him for who he truly was, someone capable of incredible kindness, even in the face of hardship. As John's story shows us, the smallest acts of kindness can create life-changing ripples. If you believe in the power of compassion and the strength of human connection, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and uplift. Like this video, share it with your friends, and help us spread the message of kindness. Your support means the world to us. As the months went by, John's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. He was no longer the homeless man huddled in an alley, desperately trying to stay warm in the freezing cold. He had a roof over his head, a steady job, and a community that supported him. But perhaps the most incredible part of his journey was how his act of kindness to one biker, a simple, selfless gesture, had transformed not only his own life but also the lives of those around him. The Hells Angels, once a symbol of rebellion and toughness, had become his extended family. They had shown him that family didn't always have to be blood. It could be forged in the unlikeliest of places. And for the first time in years, John felt like he belonged somewhere. One sunny afternoon, while he was sitting in his new apartment, reflecting on how far he'd come, his phone rang. It was Shadow. "Hey, John, I've got something special for you," Shadow said with excitement in his voice. "I've been talking to the guys, and we've decided that it's time for you to meet the rest of the world. We've got something planned." John was confused but intrigued. "What's going on?" he asked. "You'll see," Shadow replied. "Just trust me. It's going to be a big day for you." The following day, John was taken to a large building on the outskirts of town. It was an industrial space with metal doors and a large parking lot full of motorcycles. As he walked through the door, he was greeted by familiar faces, the Hells Angels he had come to know so well. "Welcome to your new world, John," Shadow said, grinning. Before John could ask what was happening, the room fell silent. At the far end of the space stood a podium, and behind it was a large banner that read, "The Power of Kindness, a celebration of brotherhood." "Today we celebrate you," Shadow continued. "Your selflessness changed everything. You showed us what it means to truly care for someone else no matter how hard life gets. And today we're going to give back to you in a way you never imagined." John's heart raced. He had no idea what was going on, but his curiosity grew with every passing second. The room filled with applause as Shadow handed John a microphone. The bikers, many of whom had lived lives full of chaos and trouble, stood in unison waiting for him to speak. John took the microphone in his hand, his palms sweaty, unsure of what to say. "I don't know what to say," he began, his voice wavering slightly. "I never expected this. I never expected my life to change like this. All I did was offer a blanket to someone in need, and somehow here I am, standing in front of a group of people who have become my family. I've been given more than I could ever have asked for." Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked around at the bikers, each one smiling at him, their faces softening. It was clear to John that the tough exteriors were just a front. They, too, had hearts full of love and kindness. "We've all been through tough times," another biker, named Big Red, said as he stepped forward. "But John here showed us what it really means to be a man, to give even when you have nothing left. And that's why we're here today, to honor him." With that, the bikers began to present John with gifts. First, they handed him a brand new leather jacket with the Hells Angels logo on it, an unmistakable symbol of belonging. "This is for you, John," Big Red said. "You're one of us now." Next, a few of the other bikers rolled forward a brand new motorcycle, a custom-made bike with sleek black paint and chrome details. "This is your new ride," Shadow said, smiling. "We want you to have something that's truly yours, something to remind you of your strength." John was speechless. He had never imagined that his life would take such a turn, from a homeless man to a part of something so much bigger. But the gifts weren't the most important thing. It was the acknowledgement, the respect, the love. As John began to take on his new role within the Hells Angels community, he was also given the opportunity to help others. He became a mentor to new recruits, many of whom had faced struggles similar to his. He shared his story with them, reminding them that even in their darkest moments there was always hope. That kindness, no matter how small, could make all the difference. John's story of redemption and brotherhood began to spread beyond the walls of the Hells Angels. It reached local news stations where his tale of kindness and the unexpected return of goodwill became a symbol of change and the potential for good in a world that often felt divided. One day, while he was out with Shadow and a few other members, they came across another homeless man on the streets, shivering from the cold. Without a second thought, John walked over and offered him his new leather jacket. The homeless man looked up, confused, but John simply said, "I know what it feels like. Take it." The biker gang watched in silence, witnessing the full circle of John's transformation. He had once been the one on the receiving end of kindness, and now he was passing it on. It wasn't about the material things. It was about the connection, the compassion, and the understanding that, no matter who you were, everyone deserved a chance. If John's journey has inspired you, make sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Share it with your friends to spread the message of kindness and how it can change lives. You never know, the simple act of kindness you show today could have a lasting impact on someone's tomorrow. In the years that followed, John's life continued to improve. He was no longer the man he once was, but every time he passed by someone in need, he didn't hesitate. He had learned that giving, no matter how small, could spark a change in the world. And as for the Hells Angels, they remained his family. The bond that formed that cold night when he gave up his only blanket had turned into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Through the generosity of strangers, the compassion of others, and the simple power of one act of kindness, John's life and the lives of many others had been changed forever. As the months turned into years, John's transformation became a beacon of hope in the city. His story of how a small act of kindness changed his life spread beyond the Hells Angels circle, becoming a symbol of how compassion could break through even the toughest barriers. People from all walks of life began to reach out to John, inspired by his journey. John's new life wasn't just about receiving help, it was about creating a ripple effect. He had been given a chance to rebuild, and now he was paying it forward, not just to the homeless, but to anyone who needed a second chance. One day, John found himself standing outside a new shelter, a building that had been renovated through donations from local businesses and the support of several community organizations. The idea for the shelter had come from a group of concerned citizens who wanted to give back to the homeless community. But they needed someone with credibility, someone who understood the streets and could bridge the gap between the community and those who felt forgotten. And that's when Shadow had suggested John. "You're the perfect person for this, man," Shadow had said one evening, sipping his beer. "You know what it feels like to be on the other side. You can help people in a way no one else can." At first, John wasn't sure. He had just started to get his own life together, and he didn't feel ready to take on such a big responsibility. But after thinking it over and talking to the other bikers, he realized that this was another way for him to give back. The idea of helping others find their way out of the darkness was something he could never turn down. The grand opening of the shelter was a success. The first few days were spent welcoming men and women who were struggling just like John once had. Some of them were still in shock, unsure of what to do next. Others were angry, bitter at the world for leaving them behind. But John knew exactly how they felt. He didn't judge them. He didn't try to push them into a new life before they were ready. Instead, he listened. He sat down with each person who came through the door, offering them the same understanding and kindness that had been offered to him. It wasn't about forcing them to change, it was about giving them the tools they needed when they were ready. And slowly but surely, they began to change. There was one man in particular who stood out to John, a young guy named Tim. Tim had been living on the streets for years and had an aura of anger about him. He was skeptical of everyone, especially the bikers who, to him, were just another group of tough guys who didn't care about anything but their own. But John didn't see him that way. He saw a young man who had given up, a man who needed someone to believe in him. Tim didn't talk much at first, but over time John earned his trust. He didn't rush Tim. He just offered a shoulder to lean on. Eventually, after months of conversations, Tim began to open up. He talked about his family, his dreams, and his fear of failure. One afternoon, as the shelter was winding down for the day, Tim approached John with a small smile. "You know, I think I'm ready to try again," he said. John nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride. "I knew you'd get there, Tim." As the years went by, John became more than just a mentor. He became a symbol of redemption, a reminder to all who met him that change was possible. no matter how dark things seemed. The Hells Angels, once seen as a group of rebellious outsiders, began to get a new reputation in the city. They were no longer just feared for their tough image. They were known for their commitment to helping others, for the unexpected acts of kindness they had shown, and for the community they had built. John's influence had changed them too, showing them that their actions didn't have to be defined by their past. Shadow, who had become a close friend and business partner to John, often reflected on the changes. One evening, as they sat in their favorite diner drinking coffee, Shadow said, "You've done something amazing here, John. Not just for yourself, but for all of us. You've shown us that we're capable of more than just surviving. We're capable of helping others survive too." John smiled. "I didn't do it alone. I had the right people around me, and now I want to make sure everyone else has that same chance." One day, a new biker, a young, enthusiastic recruit, came into the shelter. He had recently joined the Hells Angels and was eager to prove himself. But as he walked through the doors, he saw something he hadn't expected: kindness. He saw men and women, tough and hardened by life, sitting together, sharing stories, and offering support. The recruit approached John, who was sitting behind a desk, writing down some notes. "You're John, right?" the young man asked, his voice unsure. John looked up and nodded. "That's me. What can I do for you?" "I heard your story. You're the one who turned it all around, right?" The recruit's eyes were wide with admiration. John chuckled. "It wasn't all me. It was a lot of people who helped along the way." The recruit nodded, still in awe. "Well, I want to be like you. I want to help people, to make a difference. How do I start?" John paused for a moment, then smiled. "You're already on the right path, my friend. Just remember, it's not about being tough or being feared. It's about being there when someone needs you. That's what makes you a real man." As John's story shows us, the impact of kindness goes far beyond one person. It has the power to change lives, to heal wounds, and to create a bond that lasts. If you believe in the power of transformation and the importance of community, subscribe to our channel and like this video. Share it with your friends to spread the message that no one is ever truly alone, and that kindness can change the world. Your support means everything to us. As John's journey continued, he became more than just a former homeless man. He was a symbol of hope, a mentor, and a leader. His legacy lived on in the many people he helped, the lives he touched, and the community that was forever changed by his simple act of kindness. No matter where life took John, he never forgot where he came from. And he never stopped helping others, knowing that sometimes all it takes is one person to make a difference. The ripple effect of his kindness would continue to be felt for years to come, changing the lives of countless others, just as his own life had been changed so many years ago. As the years rolled on, John's life, once so full of uncertainty, became a shining example of how one person's actions can create a wave of positive change. The shelter he had helped establish grew into a cornerstone of the community, providing not just a safe place for the homeless, but a path for many to rebuild their lives. What had started as a simple act of kindness, giving his blanket to a freezing biker, had now become the foundation of an entire movement. Through his work, John became an advocate for the homeless, speaking at conferences, sharing his story in the media, and even working with city officials to improve support systems for those living on the streets. People would often approach him after his talks, some with tears in their eyes, others with hope in their hearts. His message was always the same: it's never too late to change, and no one is beyond help. One chilly autumn morning, as John was organizing donations at the shelter, a familiar motorcycle rumbled outside. John looked up to see Shadow walk through the door, his wide grin immediately easing any concerns John had. "I've got a surprise for you," Shadow said, stepping aside to reveal a tall figure walking into the shelter behind him. John's eyes widened when he saw who it was. It was the same biker, the one he had given his blanket to all those years ago. But now, instead of shivering in the cold, he was dressed in a sharp suit, his hair neatly combed, and a confident smile on his face. "I had to come back and thank you properly," the biker said, holding out his hand. "You saved my life that night, John. You showed me what it means to care for others even when you don't have anything for yourself. I didn't forget that, and now I'm doing something with it." John shook the biker's hand, his heart swelling. He remembered the cold, dark night when the biker had been just another stranger to him. Now here he was, a completely different man. "I'm doing well, John," the biker continued. "I've turned my life around, and I want to give back. You gave me a chance when no one else would, so I'm offering to fund this shelter and make it bigger, help even more people. I know what it's like to feel alone, but now I know what it's like to be part of something bigger." Tears filled John's eyes as he heard the words he had longed to hear from so many people over the years. The man who had once been a stranger was now not just a friend, but an ally in the mission to help others. The ripple effect of kindness had come full circle. "Thank you," John whispered, the weight of the moment overwhelming him. "You have no idea how much this means." And just like that, the shelter began to expand and more resources were allocated to reach even more people in need. John's vision was no longer a small shelter, but a powerful network that helped those who had lost everything find their way back. With the shelter growing and more people seeking help, John found himself in an entirely new role. A leader not just of the homeless community, but also of a growing organization. He began to train others to become mentors, teaching them the same lessons he had learned. His approach was simple: treat every person with dignity and compassion, no matter their past. But with growth came new challenges. One afternoon, as John was reviewing some paperwork in his office, he received a phone call that would change the course of his efforts. The city had decided to demolish a large portion of land where the shelter was located to make room for a new development project. John was shocked. It felt like everything he had worked so hard for was being taken away. The shelter had become a lifeline for so many, and now it was being threatened. He knew he had to act fast, but he also knew he couldn't do it alone. "Shadow," he called, his voice filled with urgency. "We've got a big problem." When Shadow arrived, John explained the situation. "This can't happen," John said, his determination growing. "This shelter is not just a building, it's a community. We can't let them tear it down." Shadow nodded, his usual grin replaced by a more serious expression. "Don't worry, we'll fight this." Fighting for the shelter. The Hells Angels, once feared for their rebellious nature, now found themselves fighting for a cause that mattered to them, fighting for the community they had built. John wasn't alone. He had the support of Shadow, the bikers, and even the people whose lives had been transformed by the shelter. The community rallied behind them. They held protests, spoke with local leaders, and gathered petitions. Slowly, the word spread. People from all walks of life came forward to show their support. The media began covering the story, shining a spotlight on the importance of the shelter and the work John had done. And then, after weeks of hard work, a breakthrough came. The city council finally agreed to halt the demolition, at least temporarily, and promised to review the situation. They recognized the value the shelter brought to the community, and they agreed to look into finding an alternative location for the project. John's heart lifted. He had fought for the people he had come to love, and they had won. As the years went by, the shelter expanded even further. John became a well-known figure in the city, not just as a former homeless man, but as an advocate, a mentor, and a true hero in his own right. His bond with the Hells Angels remained unshaken, and they continued to support the shelter, funding new programs and helping in ways they never imagined. John's story was one of incredible transformation, but it was also a story of perseverance. It showed that no matter how low you fall, no matter how hopeless things may seem, there is always a chance for change. His simple act of kindness to a freezing biker on a cold night had created a ripple that changed the lives of many, and it had created a legacy of hope that would continue for generations. John's journey reminds us all that kindness has the power to transform lives and communities. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Share it with your friends to inspire them to make a difference, no matter how small the gesture. Together we can change the world, one act of kindness at a time. As the shelter continued to thrive, John's impact expanded beyond the city limits. The story of the homeless man who had given his only blanket to a freezing biker, and the ensuing transformation of his life had become a legend in its own right. News outlets, social media platforms, and even talk shows began to pick up on the story, highlighting John as an example of how compassion could lead to extraordinary outcomes. John never sought fame. He was a humble man, and his focus was always on the work, on helping those who needed it most. But as the shelter grew and gained more recognition, he found himself on larger platforms speaking about homelessness, kindness, and the importance of community support. It was at one of these events that he met someone who would change the course of his mission forever. One day, after speaking at a charity event, John was approached by a well-dressed woman who introduced herself as Lisa Foster. She was a prominent philanthropist known for supporting numerous causes, particularly those aimed at homelessness and mental health. "I've been following your story for some time now, John," Lisa said with a smile. "What you've accomplished is nothing short of extraordinary. I want to help." John looked at her skeptically, unsure of what to expect. Over the years, many people had come forward with promises of support, only to back out when it got tough. But there was something about Lisa's sincerity that caught his attention. "I appreciate that," John replied. "But we've been doing well on our own. I'm not sure we need more publicity or donations." Lisa nodded, understanding his hesitation. "I know what it's like to do this work. I've seen firsthand how hard it is. But I think there's something bigger here. What if I told you I could help you expand this shelter to other cities? To create a network of shelters across the country, each one focused on not just providing food and shelter, but on long-term solutions to get people back on their feet." John paused. The idea was bold, but it resonated with him. He had always dreamed of creating a broader system that didn't just help people survive, but helped them thrive. The notion of giving others the same chance he had received was too powerful to ignore. "I've always wanted to do something like that," John said, his voice full of possibility. "But I didn't know where to begin." Lisa smiled. "That's where I come in. I have the resources and the connections to make this happen. But more than that, I have the passion to see this through." And just like that, a partnership was formed. With Lisa's financial support and her extensive network, John's mission expanded quickly. They worked together to set up shelters in cities across the country, each one providing the same core services. Not only housing, but job training, mental health support, and community engagement. The model they had created in their hometown was now being replicated in cities where homelessness was a growing crisis. But the expansion wasn't without its challenges. As they began opening more shelters, they ran into resistance from local governments and communities who were wary of the changes these facilities would bring. Some feared an increase in crime or disruption to the neighborhood. But John, having experienced the most extreme side of these concerns, knew how to approach them. He worked with city officials, engaged with local leaders, and held public meetings to explain the mission behind the shelters. Slowly, the stigma surrounding the project began to fade. In one pivotal meeting, John stood before a room full of concerned citizens in a small town in the Midwest. The room was filled with skepticism, and many voices were raised in opposition. "I know that some of you are worried about what this might bring to your community," John said calmly, his voice steady. "But let me tell you this, I've lived on the streets. I've seen what it's like to have nothing, to be looked down upon by society. These shelters aren't just places to sleep. They're places to heal, to rebuild, and to give people a chance to become something they've never had the opportunity to be." His words resonated deeply with the audience. By the end of the meeting, a majority of the citizens had come to support the project. The town became one of the first to fully back the new shelter initiative. As John's shelters began to span across the country, a sense of community developed among those who had been helped. People who had once been on the streets struggling to survive now had a chance at something better, and many of them, inspired by John's story, began to give back in their own ways. Tim, the young man John had mentored years ago, had become one of the shelter's most dedicated volunteers. He worked alongside others who had once been in his shoes, helping to guide them on their own journeys. John watched with pride as Tim grew into a leader, taking on more responsibility within the shelter system. "This is what it's all about," Tim told John one afternoon, after a long day of work. "You gave me a chance, and now I'm doing the same for others." John smiled, feeling the full weight of what they had created. It wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was a movement, a network of people who cared about each other, who understood the value of compassion and kindness, a family that had grown beyond its original boundaries, touching lives all over the country. With the network of shelters thriving and more people than ever receiving the help they needed, John found himself reflecting on everything he had achieved. What had started as a simple act of kindness had snowballed into something that was changing the very fabric of society. But even with all his success, John remained humble. He knew that his journey wasn't over. There were still millions of people out there who needed help, and his work was far from done. Every city he visited, every person he helped reminded him that kindness never ends. It only grows. One day, as John walked through the halls of one of his shelters, Tim caught up to him, holding a letter. "This came for you," Tim said, handing it over. John opened it and smiled as he read. It was a letter from a young man who had once been homeless, but had now started his own business, thanks to the support he had received from the shelter. The man wrote that he had used the skills he had learned at the shelter to start a small company, and he was now employing others who had been in the same situation. "Your story helped me find my way." The letter ended. "Now I want to do the same for someone else." John folded the letter, his eyes misty with emotion. He had never imagined that his simple act of kindness would lead to so many lives being touched, so many people given the chance to start over. It was proof that kindness, no matter how small, could change the world. John's journey continues to inspire us all. If his story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. Share it with your friends, and let's spread the message of hope, compassion, and the incredible impact of kindness. Together we can make a difference just like John did.